All right, we are back with the first Power Hour of 2025. Ryan Clark, my friend, my castmate on NFL Live, one of the hosts of the Pivot podcast, is here to do another Power Hour. He came on last year. It's my power rankings of the entire NFL. You also let me know, Ryan, that you prepared this time, which is going to be interesting.
Yeah, like the last time I wasn't ready, so we was kind of going with the flow, and I just felt like it took me too long to like process through everything. So I'm ready to go.
For those who don't remember, the way this works is actually similar to how I do the war room for the draft. I am going to give my guests, in this case Ryan, 2 teams for every slot, and then you choose the team that you think deserves to be in that slot, and then we move on, and you get another team to go up against it. It moves pretty quickly, so just tell me who you're choosing and why after I give you every choice. Starting with, at number 1, the Ravens and the Eagles are my 2 teams.
Yeah, I'm going with the Eagles. Listen, now I know the Eagles have to rebuild a lot on the back end, right? You lose C.J. Gardner-Johnson, you lose Darius Slay, and so you have some pieces on that defensive side of the ball that have to be replaced. But I love what Howie Roseman did early on with Jahad Campbell. I mean, we had that conversation, right? He always finds a piece. Nakobe Dean is going to be coming off of an injury. Zach Bond gets an extension. And I just think offensively, with the physicality they played with last year, Jalen now having that championship, that leadership, what they can do outside as well. So I have the Eagles at number 1.
Do you think these were the correct first 2 teams before I move on?
I do. I do think they were the correct first 2 teams, and Baltimore is my number 2 team. I will say this too, Mina, with Baltimore at 2, the Jair Alexander move played a large part in that for me.
Okay, well, let me give you the number 2 choice before you explain why, because you're going to choose Baltimore over them. I hear you. So for number 2, I'm going to bring in the Chiefs here. Pretty standard. Why the Ravens over the Chiefs? Talk about Jair Alexander, because you and I actually haven't got a chance to talk about that, so I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I just thought, one, Lamar's the GM now, right? So that's cool. I love that part of that piece of it. So now, and me and you had this conversation. I thought Ardarius Washington played really well last year.
Yeah.
Right. And so you go and you draft Malachi Starks early. And I was sort of wondering what that fit would be. Because if you go back to Georgia last year, he played in the slot a ton. But Marlon was great in the slot. And so I was wondering how they were going to utilize those things. And I think adding Jair made me more comfortable with what they'll do in the sub packages. Having Jair on the outside, having Nate Wiggins on the outside, Marlon in the slot. Now you can use Kyle as a dime and play with Ardarius and Malachi Starks on the back end. And so I think they have so much flexibility now defensively, and we know what they are offensively with Derrick Henry and, Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, Baltimore came in 3rd on my top 10 defenses pod. And one of the things Dominique and I talked about, in addition to the flexibility you allude to on the back end, was that in the second half of last season, they were actually the best or second best defense in the NFL by most metrics. And we talked a lot about that on NFL Live, but do you expect that to continue this year, like building on what they did in the second half of last year after they fixed their problems?
I do, but do you remember, Mina, when Mike McDonald took over initially?
Yeah.
And how they struggled early on in his tenure until he kind of got into the groove. I think we saw a little bit of the same thing last year. And as they started to figure stuff out toward the middle of the year down to the end, I felt like they were dominant defensively. And I expect that to carry over into this season.
Okay, so 2 new teams, a new team at 3. I am giving you a choice between the 2 teams that played in the AFC Championship, the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills. Who are you taking here?
I'm taking the Chiefs, and it's really close, though. It's really close for me. I still feel like outside Buffalo needs a piece, and that Kansas City didn't do a lot, in my opinion, to improve protection for Patrick Mahomes. But when I think of Rashee Rice returning, the sort of space and the place that Xavier Worthy found himself headed down the stretch of the season, what we saw in the Super Bowl, it felt like they figured out how to utilize his speed in the best way possible. I know skinny Travis Kelce has arrived at minicamp. And I just think Steve Spagnuolo and what he's been able to do defensively, I do think the Justin Reed loss to New Orleans is a bigger thing than
Sneaky.
we've made a deal
Yeah.
out of. I think that's sneaky. He did so much for that team, especially from a physicality and the man-to-man coverage on tight end standpoint, blitzing as well. So that'll be a piece that they have to start sort of rebuild around. But I think that the Chiefs are still one of the top teams, obviously, in all of the league, and I put them slightly over Buffalo.
Yeah, the Rice return, which we talked about this on my top 10 offenses pod. Like, I don't quite understand what's going on legally and when that suspension is going to happen and whatnot. But assuming he plays the beginning of the season, Ryan, like, he was unbelievably productive for Kansas City in the second half of his rookie year and then the beginning of last year before he got hurt. And I, to your point, feel like he complements Xavier. Like, they really fit together well, especially they started using Xavier Worthy as man coverage on those outbreakers. Rasheed Rice is on the inbreakers. He beats zone. I really think this Chiefs offense is going to bounce back in a big way. All right.
Mina, you know what didn't these seasons sort of mirror each other though? Remember early on, we were trying to figure out what Rasheed Rice was going to be, and they figured it out. And I thought the thing about Xavier Worthy too is that they stopped focusing on him as a deep threat only. Right? They put him in motion. They used him in crossers. He was part of the bunch routes and the bunch formations, part of the stacks. And I think now you add Rasheed Rice to that, who really became their best receiver in his rookie season down the stretch. That'll be huge.
For number 4, I'm going to give you the Bills again, of course. And I'm going to put them up against, I'm going to go back across the conference to the NFC. I'm going to put them up against the Lions here. Bills, Lions.
Yeah. And so I'm going Bills. I have the Bills at 4. Man, like I think at some point we started to at least a little bit take Josh Allen's season for granted. Right. And it's been disgusting me just all off season that every time somebody wants to make this Aaron Rodgers is still elite sort of point, they go, well, he threw as many touchdowns or more touchdowns than Josh Allen. Bro, shut up. Josh Allen was standing on the sideline in fourth quarters this year. Josh Allen was the number 1 red zone threat for the Buffalo Bills. They had a team that ran the ball and then used Josh Allen to make big plays when he needed to. I thought he was phenomenal last year. And, this team was really a couple of quarterback sneaks and a 4th down blitz away from representing the AFC in the Super Bowl. And I think that this team improved throughout the offseason. I believe when you do what Josh Allen did and sort of get over that hump of winning the MVP, become that guy everybody thinks you are, it gives you a level of confidence that you walk into the next season knowing that you're the guy. They're still, and this is my opinion, they still need somebody on the outside that's going to step up and win one-on-one. So, right? Yeah. Somebody that they can count on in the most important moments. Shakur became that guy they moved around and used, but I think Keon Coleman has to take a step this year in being a more reliable target.
I talked about this on NFL Live last week. Josh Allen was amazing last year in just about every metric, but he was, I think, 2nd overall in QBR against zone and 9th against man. And what I said was, that's not a Josh Allen stat. That's a Bills receiver stat. You're in a conference team in Kansas City that loves to play press man cover. Like, they needed somebody who can reliably be that guy who can win those one-on-ones. And I think one of those guys like Coleman has to step up. So I'm with you there. All right. Lions still here. Lions or the Bengals at 5?
Ooh, you went Bengals, Lions at 5?
Is that a lot higher than you had the Bengals?
Oh, yeah. This is good, though. This is good. Okay. So I went Lions. Yeah. I went Lions. And what I'm interested to see about the Lions, Mina, is obviously David Montgomery got hurt last season, right? And so we kind of saw that Jahmyr Gibbs can be that feature guy without almost having a 1-2 punch, right? For David Montgomery to do certain things. But I felt like Ben Johnson got cute in some ways and sometimes that he didn't need to. So I want to see if they're going to really rely on Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, that run game, and utilize the play action game off of that, and not necessarily think that that has to be the priority or that is the primary thing, or we got to trick people, or we got to go into some of these games and outsmart people. When I feel like physicality was the Detroit Lions' superpower offensively, right? The
Uh,
ability to go ahead.
do you worry about the losses on the interior of the offensive line? Does that concern you?
I mean that's true, right? So you lose. Well, they lost two linemen, right? What it was
Yeah, they
it?
lost their center and one of their guards.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like
Besides,
that. I mean, and that's big. I think the other thing I'm worried about is losing two coordinators is a big deal,
yeah.
right? You
Which
lose Aaron
loss
Glenn.
concerns you more?
I think it's the Aaron Glenn loss to me that
Really?
is huge. Yeah, because I thought Ben Johnson he's obviously extremely innovative. That team was explosive. I believe a lot of those things carry over. I feel like at some point we forgot how many players were lost defensively for the
Yeah.
Lions. Obviously Aiden Hutchinson was the one that we focused on, but it felt like week after week, Amik Robinson was moving from the slot to the outside. You were losing backers as well. And I felt like this team or Aaron Glenn held this team together like with a band-aid throughout the entire season defensively. And so it'll be interesting to see what Kelvin Shepard, fellow LSU guy,
Yeah.
is able to do as the defense coordinator.
All right. So the Bengals are still here. I had a little bit of trouble figuring out in this kind of 6 to 9 range. I was deciding between a few teams. I'm gonna go with the Packers here. Bengals or
So I have
Packers?
the Packers. I have
Okay.
the Packers over the Bengals. I was a Packer guy. I think when you look at what they were able to do, adding Golden, adding Williams in the third round, picking McCole Hardman up in free agency, because you expect, I'm sure, that Christian Watson won't be ready early on in the season. And when I looked at this team from the offensive standpoint, does Jordan Love make that jump to the elite? Right? That was the question after 2 seasons ago because of how well he played down the stretch. And I felt like him with his injury, he didn't necessarily take that step. But I thought that LaFleur was great with like deception and creativity in the run game and the ways that he utilized Josh Jacobs. And I say you have that. I loved what Halfley did defensively. I feel like they have to get more out of Quay Walker. And I know
Mm,
right now I saw recently they were talking about extending him, right? And extending his
really?
contract. There's sometimes to me that he looks lost on,
Yeah.
on the field, right? That he doesn't quite have a place to fit. But when you look at him, Mina, long arms, rangy, can get
Big.
sideline to sideline. It feels like he's supposed to be one of those ones and one of those guys, and I just haven't seen it.
How good was Edgerrin Cooper though? Man,
A
as a
monster.
blitzer, so good last year. And Evan Williams. Yeah, I mean they
Yeah.
got a lot of young talent on that side of the ball. Okay, so the Bengals are still up for consideration at 7. Here, I'm going to give you a choice between the Bengals and the Commanders.
I went Commanders.
Okay.
Like the one thing I do appreciate is that I feel like I'm kind of on point, but now you got me wondering about the Bengals. I went I went Commanders. I still feel like the Commanders are missing someone in the pass rush. Right? I feel like
100%.
that
100% agree.
they still don't have that guy that's gonna go out and win in those 4-man rushes without having to bring pressure. I also wonder if defense coordinator Joe Witt is going to be able to find the same success with the way he used Frankie Louvu last year. Right? Frankie became kind of like that chess piece, like we're gonna blitz him. He's gonna be the guy, he was almost, and you watch as much football as me, if not more sometimes. He kind of had like a JOK feel from what
Mm,
I see in Cleveland. They were like, okay, let's use him in ways that are a little unconventional that allows him to be a playmaker. I wonder if that continues this week. They went with Amos in the second round though, and everything I'm hearing, Mina, about him in
Yeah.
offseason is everything you said
We
before
both
the
liked
draft.
him. We both liked him. This was the Ole Miss
Yeah,
corner, who they drafted. Well, they need him to be good because
yeah,
our boy Lattimore did not did not look great when he came. Hopefully, he comes back
yeah.
better than last year. A little removed from the injury.
But if they can do that though, man, if Lattimore is good, Amos plays the way that I'm expecting. Now Mike Sandstrom can move to the slot,
Back to
which to me is
slot.
a more natural position for him.
Totally agree. But we're not even talking about the offense because we think the offense is going to be good. We're not. It's really the defense is the limiting factor. All right. Speaking of teams where the defense is the limiting factor, the Bengals are still on the board. They've been dropping. I'm gonna bring in the Rams here. Rams versus Bengals for the 8th spot.
I went Bengals there.
Okay.
That was where I had the Bengals. And Al Golden, who is now one of my favorite people because he coached my son last year at Notre Dame. I'm wondering how much of the way he called defense in college transfers to the.
Let me stop you right here. This Bengals defense is not playing that amount of man coverage unless they want to get blown out every single game. Right? Like,
Hey, Mina, that was my point, right? That is what I was getting to. I watched this team play, 80% man coverage the entire season. And so
good too.
how you change that is important. And look, to me, I think Trey Hendrickson's deal gets done. I don't know in what shape or fashion, but it has to get done for them. I expect Shamar Stewart to be in, who to me, Stewart, Mina, was a guy that needed an offseason. Right, he was a guy that needed to be in the building. It's like, yeah, you got all of these amazing traits, but the production didn't say that, right? And so, how do you get him to be a part of what you do up front? And I do think on the back end, there's a lot of tweaks that need to be had, but offensively, like Joe said, he wanted both of those guys back. He got both of those dudes back. I felt like the run game improved as the season wore on. They were able to use backs in the pass game as well. Mike Gesicki had a huge year. I think they're going to be incredibly difficult to stop.
Rams versus Texans here. This might be a little high for the Texans. Am I overweighting the?
I went with the Rams.
Okay, Rams.
Yeah, I went with the Rams. I actually got to see Devontae at Adams at Fanatics Fest, and he is, Mina, a true student of the game. Yeah. We were sitting at Zero Bond, and it's about midnight, right? And we're watching videos on his phone. We're talking about routes, and we're talking about setups and the way that McVay's going to utilize him. And he's saying, okay, well, now we could do this with Tutu. Puka can excel in this way. Kyron is this. And he told me something that really stood out. He said, I got to play with an older Aaron. He's like, Matthew has that type of stuff still in his arm. Right. And we're talking about the Aaron Rodgers that was able to come back and win 2 MVPs. He said he's like, Matthew still got it.
Like 2021.
And he said,
is what you're talking about.
Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. Green Bay, still in Green Bay,
MVP year.
And he was just saying, he was like, that reminds me of that. And he said he also has this level of competitiveness to him that you still see at practice without a hole to it. And that really sparked my interest. I think it's big for this team this year, though, to start faster. Sort of find an identity faster so they don't have to make that run down the back end. But if they're healthy, I think they're going to be really difficult to beat when you look at the way that defense came along late in the season. And, the fact that if Jalen Carter doesn't just take over a drive late in that divisional round of the playoff, the Philadelphia Eagles could be going to overtime against this team.
All right. Texans are still on the board for the 10th overall team. I'm going to throw in the Broncos here. Texans versus Broncos.
So I went Texans here. Okay. Here's where I went Texans. Mina, the most difficult decision they're going to have on the back end is what package to play.
Yeah. Don't ask.
so nasty. Like, just you
Also,
look
does anyone
there.
fit the identity of this defense more than CJ Gardner-Johnson, who they just
Nobody.
like, yeah, it's like
Nobody.
completely hand in glove fit. And I don't begrudge the Eagles for moving on, but like, holy smokes, what an identity addition.
Yeah, you know what's funny is like I want to have a conversation with it because I know him and just be like, what happened, right? Because he's only played great in Philadelphia 2 times, and to not be there and to be so talented, to be so impactful physically, attitude wise, the way he plays the ball, I think it's a perfect fit. I do wonder how this works now with Kalen Bullock, who is a ball hawk,
So good.
right? A ball hawk as well. And you remember, obviously you remember, but Jalen Petrie being mostly a slot player, right?
Well,
And they played a ton of sub even on first downs. And so I wonder how that works. But it's like when you're that good up front,
that's the thing.
you know,
Like, so many of these defenses are like smoke and mirrors. You know, the Ravens, the Chargers, who we're going to talk about shortly. The Texans just have dudes at every. I would say linebacker is the one place where they're like a little bit weak, but yeah,
inside, yeah.
it's crazy defense. Before we move on, are you worried about the offensive line though derailing
Yep.
this offensive? Okay,
Yep.
don't
I
even
am.
really.
And you know
Yeah.
what, Mina? My question would be for you. You know, I know you brought me on here to talk, but my question would be for you is when people talk about CJ's second year, and some of it was on him. There were some misses, and I felt like that started to happen as the season grew long. No Nico, the pressure, so much of that too was on the offensive line.
Yeah.
And if you don't protect him, that becomes an issue when you get into playing the elite teams down the stretch.
I am of the belief that if an offensive line is as bad as they were last year, it's inevitably going to start affecting the quarterback, and you see that build up over the course of the season. I think they're really hoping the coordinator change to Nick Caley from the Rams
Yes.
helps with the run game,
Mm-hmm.
but I'll believe it when I see it. All right, I'm going to go stay in the division here, a divisional showdown. Broncos versus Chargers. I see these teams as being pretty similarly tiered. I don't know how you had them.
Yes, I do have them very close. I went with the Chargers, actually. I went with the Chargers. I am unapologetically a big Jim Harbaugh fan. I think in short spurts, right? I think he is incredibly good at doing his job. And now you look at Najee and Amorian Hampton in the backfield. I think this puts Najee where he needs to be, right? You're not going to ask him to be the lead guy. Amorian Hampton, I thought, was just extremely explosive at North Carolina. He had vision, he had contact balance, he had the explosiveness to reel off the big run, which we know that's not what Najee does. And you think about what they were able to do last year with Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins in the backfield. And I think I saw you tweet something about I call him Ladarius McConkey. Like
He's so good, dude.
just so good. And
So
I think, and I mess with him every time I see him, because when I see him, I just immediately call him Emmanuel Sanders. Right. And I was like, and he was laughing about it. I said, bro, I just had to give you a black comp. You know what I mean? I was like, I refused to call you Wes Welker. I just did. And what I loved was the amount of times he beat man-to-man
yeah,
coverage in
yes.
the intermediate to deep part of the field, right? With route running, with acceleration, out of breaks. I know he takes that next step this year, and this is a dude that's going to play Pro Bowl caliber ball.
Yeah. I think the rep I posted was him cooking maybe Jaquan McMillan in man coverage, but it was ugly. Whoever was on the other side of that, he is an awesome player. All right, the Broncos are still on the board. I'm gonna bring the Bucks in here, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Who do you have, the Bucks or the Broncos?
So, gosh, you're so good at this. So I went Tampa Bay over
Okay.
the Broncos.
Broncos
I
fall on
went
the
Tampa Bay over the Broncos. Yeah, I just Mike Evans said that this was the most talented wide receiver room he'd been a part of, and I sort of agree with that.
yeah.
He's not. I think he's not where he used to be. But you go to last two drafts and what they did early on in the drafts with wide receivers, I think Emeka Ibuka fits perfectly into where he can play in the slot. Obviously, they got to get some health as well in that room. I love the fact that they went out and got Hassan Reddick. They went and made sure they shored up the defensive line. I thought that was important. And Benjamin Morrison is a really good football player. He's coming off of a hip. Um, so you wanna make sure he's in a place health wise where he's 100%. He's a press guy, plays the ball well, had 6 picks as a freshman at Notre Dame, and his father, who was actually the chaplain of Washington when I was there, who was also drafted in the 6th round, played for Washington throughout his career. He's been prepping him to be a professional his entire life, and I think he adds value to that team right away. And also on the back end, I mean, you got one of the best safeties in the game as well. And he missed some times last year. And I think when he comes back and he's healthy this year, it changes what they do.
I think what I like about both the Bucks and the Broncos is I really like betting on teams with elite offensive lines. And the Bucks, going back and watching the Bucks offense, holy smokes, that offensive line was playing really well. So
yeah, quarterback play reflected that as well.
100%, right? Like, can Baker Mayfield do it again? Yeah, because he's in incredible, one of the best situations in football, and we don't really talk about that enough. Okay, Broncos still on the board. For 13, I'm going to bring in, this is where it gets a little praggy. I'm going to go Niners here. Maybe that's high, the Niners. Niners versus Broncos.
I went Broncos here.
Okay.
I went Broncos here. Secondary wise, Mina, this team is.
Okay, well, let me challenge you that, because I had the Broncos and the Texans as my 1 and 2 defenses. Who has the better secondary, the Broncos or the Texans? Really tough question.
Texans. The Texans.
Texans. Yeah.
I think the Texans.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, and
it's close, and it's close.
Oh, it's especially if Hufanga returns to the form we saw him as an All-Pro Pro Bowler at San Francisco, and obviously Patrick Surtain is the best corner in ball, but Lassiter's ability to get the football is something I wasn't expecting. Now, the guy on the
okay, sorry, we're talking about the Broncos.
The guy on the other side, though, Mina, like Derek Stingley is everything he was supposed to be when I met him when he was 14.
But how about Patrick Surtain? I mean, yeah. Surtain, Moss,
and so,
Barron.
Yeah, it's just I love everything about that secondary. So I'm gonna go with Houston over them. But I think the Broncos are going to be great. Offensive line is a big part of what they do. And I'm gonna be honest, Bo Nix was better than I thought.
Same.
I don't know what the ceiling is, right? Like how much better he continues to get. But when you look at the Oregon film, some of the things I saw there, where I was like, okay, they're basically, getting it out of his hands quickly. The reads are easy. Dudes are wide open. There's a lot of chin run. We saw him play above that a little bit last year. And the way he started to utilize his legs probably from about the New Orleans Saints game on throughout the season was really big.
Turns out this Sean Payton guy, pretty good offensive coach, in case people forgot, by the way.
He is.
Okay.
He is.
So the Niners are still on the board. Did I first of all, do I have the Niners way higher than you, or are we getting into similar territory?
No, we're getting into Niners realm.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to bring in a team that I feel like could this team could be way better than this and also could be worse. That's the Minnesota Vikings. We're going Vikings versus Niners for the 14th overall pick.
So I had the Vikings higher than the Niners, and I had them here. I'm truly a believer in Kevin O'Connell. I really am in what he does with quarterbacks, his ability to not only evaluate them, but evaluate what they can do well and implement that. Right? Like, remember, he had us thinking for a week that Josh Dobbs was going to be like the answer. You know what I'm saying?
Multiple weeks, right?
multiple weeks, right? And so I think that J. No, I believe there's a lot of pressure on JJ McCarthy. Like,
Yeah.
our morning shows, we don't necessarily do like the hardest hitting analysis on X's and O's, but we did ask the question like who has the most pressure on them. And when you move on from Sam Darnold, and I get why you do with the way that season ended, you're talking about a team that was able to win 14 games though. Right. And so now JJ McCarthy steps into a position with a coach that we understand is one of the best in the game, but also a skill position, room when you look
Ridiculous.
at Jettas, you look at Addison, you look at what they have at the tight end position, you bring Aaron back in the backfield, he should be able to step right in and make plays. And then defensively, if you could continue to keep up sort of the creativity, the deception that people throw the football into again this year, which I think is this year is going to be more difficult to me defensively because I felt like people started to figure it out.
A little bit, yeah.
People started to understand where to go with the football. And if those turnovers don't keep up, if that pressure can't keep up, I think that's why they fall off a little bit this year from where they were last year to me.
We should talk about this in NFL Live. I'm really interested in seeing if Brian Flores puts a little bit more faith in his front to rush, because they added John Allen and Hargrave. Dallas Turner didn't really do much, but I think you make an excellent point. I also do not love this corner group in Minnesota, but I do think they're still going to be really, really good. They finished in our top 10 defenses. Yeah. Okay, the Niners are still here, and I'm going to go with this. Put them against a team they continuously demolish in the playoffs, Dallas Cowboys. Niners versus Cowboys.
I went with the Niners. I went with the Niners here. Huh?
Is this too high for the Cowboys? Why are you laughing?
Well, just because like the Cowboys are just always that team that you feel weird even talking about.
I know.
And especially when you put them in this position, this could honestly be too high, Mina. It could also end up being too low by the end of the season for the Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, physicality for them, we'll talk about 49ers, but obviously physicality for them on both sides of the football up front is going to be huge. But, man, they could be explosive. Matt Eberflus is a hell of a defensive coach as well. But I went with the 49ers. You obviously lose some pieces on the offensive side of the ball. You're going to be waiting for Brandon Ayuk to return. You secure that offense with Brock Purdy. You give him the extension. But they improved in a lot of ways on the defensive line. I felt like they were focused on making sure, especially interior, and from the interior defensive line standpoint,
that stop the run.
that they found a way to get better. And I don't care what anybody say, Fred Warner's the dude.
Still.
Still the dude. So now you get some interior alignment in front of him where you can keep him clean sometimes, where you can give him opportunities to be downhill, to be sideline to sideline. It only helps them in what they're doing. So I went with San Francisco there.
Okay, here's our top 15. After the break, we're going to come back and do the second half. I guess technically that was but whatever, of the Power Hour. All right, so before we get started, I want to ask you, was there any team you had where you were like, don't tell me which one, because we'll get to them, but was there any team where you were like, wow, it's really surprising she hasn't gotten to them yet? Or is this pretty much in line with your picks?
It's pretty much in line. Like there were some of them that were kind of out of order for what I had them, but these were like pretty much the teams I had there.
Okay, so at the turn of the rankings, we've got the Cowboys, and here I am going to put them up against, you mentioned this team a little bit earlier, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Steelers versus Cowboys at 16.
I had the Steelers higher, actually. I think defensively right now I know more about the Pittsburgh Steelers than I do the Dallas Cowboys. You add Darius Slay opposite Joey Porter Jr., who I felt like, and you could tell me you think I'm wrong, took not a step back necessarily, but didn't take the step forward I was expecting in year two, at the corner position. I think TJ Watt will be in camp. They'll get him done. I don't believe Aaron Rodgers is the Aaron Rodgers of old, but I believe he's good enough to allow this team uh, to be able to produce offensively. I would have loved, and I know they do similar things, Mina, but to me, the excitement of Aaron Rodgers coming here was that they'd have DK and George Pickens. You
Right.
know,
Especially a guy who likes
initially,
to play
you
ISO
know,
football and Aaron Rodgers, like having 2 ball
yes,
winners. It would have been, yeah. DK's an injury. We
you
talked
know,
about this at the AFC North this week. I talked about it. In some ways, it's a good fit. In some ways, let's just say the first time, DK like flattens his route at the wrong depths or something, it's gonna be really funny
no,
to watch.
like if I'm being honest, Mina, I thought, and I know he's a little temperamental. I would playing wise, I like what George Pickens does with Aaron Rodgers better than what DK does.
Mm,
Um, and so I would
yep.
have loved to see that. But I do
Back
believe that
shoulder.
the Steelers, yeah, I believe the Steelers belong here. I think
Okay.
that Mike Tomlin is just too damn good. Aaron Rodgers will be an upgrade over what they had in the quarterback room last year. You know, you go back to what last year's game, I think it was the Dolphins, the Jacksonville Jaguars late in the season when he started to be able to move around a little bit and got on the same page. You could see he could still put the football where it needs to be.
Cowboys against the Bears. It's early for the Bears. Am I
I went
over?
Cowboys here.
Okay.
No, I went Cowboys here though.
Well, we just talked
I
about
thought
Pickens.
I think that
So, yeah.
yeah, I'm with the Cowboys here. I mean, Pickens and CD Lamb. Um, People don't really recognize how good Jake Ferguson actually is
Mm.
at the tight end position. But this team has to be better running the football and stopping the run. Like that is to me what's been the Achilles heel of this team. And I also think this is a year that Dak Prescott has to find a way to outplay the other two big time quarterbacks in the division, Jalen Hurts and Jaden Daniels. Um, this is like Dak has to show that leadership. He has to show that execution in the pass game. There really is no excuse that he shouldn't this year. Obviously, getting Mike assigned is going to be a big deal. I think that gets done. But how does Matt Eberflus find some physicality on this defensive side of the ball to where they're just not run through each and every time you face a team that's going to play you with physicality?
I'm looking at the defensive depth chart, and I'm not sure how he finds that physicality. I'm not gonna lie. I do love this offense, though. I think it's gonna be super explosive, or has potential to.
Yeah.
Okay, Bears. I'm gonna throw in another team that I think might surprise you. I'm gonna put the Jags here.
Whoa.
That's probably higher than you had the Jags, right?
That this is the first one that's early.
Okay. Bears
This is,
versus Jaguars. We'll talk about the Jaguars. Well, I'm assuming you're taking the Bears then.
I'm taking the Bears.
Okay.
I'm taking the Bears. Obviously we know what Ben Johnson is capable of. I think defensively, this team is right there, especially with the pieces that they have. They shored up the offensive line of scrimmage. I think on the outside, you have big time players. You know, I love obviously you had two big time tight ends in this draft. Tyler Warren, who went to the Colts, Loveland, who ends up going to the Bears. And I think he just fits what Ben Johnson wants to do in sort of that Sam Laporta 12 personnel sort of way he loves to use them. Now you have Cole Kmet and you have a guy that could stretch the field, a guy that could get down the seam, someone who Caleb Williams can identify early in his progression. And so I think that that's going to be huge for him. I think getting Caleb to play on time is going to be extremely important, but I do believe Ben can figure out ways to do that. And so I had the Bears here.
Dennis Allen too. Low key, one of my favorite slept on hires of the entire offseason.
Because this is the thing. He can do that job.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Incredibly well for years.
Yeah. Yeah, he could do that job.
Okay. This is a tough range for me, the 19 through 23. I'm going to go Jags versus, let's stay in the state of Florida. Jags versus Dolphins at 19.
So I had the Dolphins 2 behind here. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go Dolphins there.
Okay.
Right. I do think Mike McDaniel has to evolve in some way, though, Mina. I think there has to be something that happens post snap that's different from what we've seen throughout his tenure. Teams figured out if we don't let him move us, move our eyes, make us adjust, make us run pre snap, then post snap, everything ends up in the same place. Right. And so we saw teams as the season started to wear on, like, hey, we're not going to run with this motion. We're not going to burst with the inside to outside motion to number one. We're going to stand pat. We're going to stay put. And when this ball is snapped, everything ends up from a route progression in the same place. And also the run game, like the tricky stuff is good, but sometimes they got to be able to line up and just go.
Yeah.
And they haven't been able to do that. And so I think that's going to be really big for Mike McDaniel this year.
Jags versus Cardinals for 20.
I had the Cardinals ahead of the Jags.
Okay.
I'm sticking with what I had. I had the Cardinals ahead of the Jags. The Cardinals did this one thing that was important. They said, you know what, guys, we got to go add some pieces defensively.
Yeah. Yes.
Whether it was okay, we got to add pieces in free agency, we're going to add pieces in the draft. I can't believe that Calais Campbell is still playing. You know what I mean?
Well,
But and when you think about what he does well and the way that they can utilize him, I think it's a perfect fit. You also go out, you get Tomlinson, you get Josh Sweat. Me and you have had conversations about Garrett Williams and the Baker on the back end. Obviously, you go get Will Johnson, who to me was one of those guys that was sort of an enigma in the draft, right? We still don't know how fast he is. Shefty was talking a little bit about his knee and his health, but he's a guy that gets the football though.
Yes.
Right? He's a guy that understands route combinations, understands how to see things from zone. Now you go and you turn the ball over. The unique ways you can use Buda Baker. You were texting about that recently. The fact that, like, honestly, he has two things that are out of pocket, right? One, he's of the wrong era of football players. He should have played with us, right? And the other thing is too, he's in the wrong body.
Yeah.
Like
I had a chance to talk to Buddha about this a little bit. It's an interview on YouTube, and he was talking about how, like, now that they actually have some vets, they might not have to play as chaotic a brand of defense. But I have to say, I did love the chaos. But yeah, now you have some actual pass rushers. Buda Baker was their best pass rusher. It's not a good thing.
But
safety.
I think though too, some of that chaos put him in positions that he succeeds in.
Yeah. Yes. That's why I hope he sustain some of it.
Totally. Yeah, that he is impactful. So I don't want to take that away from him.
Okay, the Jags are still on the board. I'm going to stay in the NFC West, and because I have the Cardinals and the Seahawks very close personally, I'm going to bring in the Seahawks here. So Jags.
I had the Seahawks here.
Okay.
I had the Seahawks here.
Okay, I was way too high on the Jags in your estimation. We'll get to the Jags.
In my estimation. Yeah. So I had the Seahawks here. I don't know what Sam Darnold is in Seattle. Right? I knew what he was in Minnesota. I don't know which Sam Darnold we get. I obviously don't expect him to be as bad as he was in the last two games that were defining moments for him. But does he reach some of those heights, right? Jackson Smith and Jigba would obviously be really big for this team this year. I mean, you had two veterans that were sure things when you think of Tyler Lockett, you think of DK Metcalf. Now, JSN steps into that spot to take over there. I think he's fully capable, but he has a specific skill set, right? There's a thing, that he does. I think this defense takes the next step kind of in the same way that we watched Mike McDonald do with the Baltimore Ravens. And I believe that that's going to be something that carries this team a ton this year.
Love this defense. Very excited to watch them. That's sort of what is, to me, the case for them. All right.
The thing will be, though, 1 second. What do you get can't pronounce his name. What do you get from the kid from South Carolina though?
I'm worried.
Yeah,
You and I, we should
like what
talk
do
about this on NFL Live. I don't see him. I think there's a lot of bad comps for him floating out there. Like he is not Cam Chancellor. He is not Kyle
at all
Hamilton. But
at all?
I do like they already have so much talent in the secondary. I don't think
Yeah,
he'll be put in a position where he can't succeed. I think they have the flexibility already on the back end to
yeah.
figure out how to put him closer to the box, things like that. All right. Jags still on the board. I'm gonna put them against the Falcons here at 22.
I'm going Falcons.
Wow,
Yeah,
I had
I'm
them
going Falcons.
okay,
Um,
Falcons.
yeah, the Falcons understood that they need to get better up front. When you look at the first two picks, they what was it? Walker and Pierce Jr. They focused on getting better up front. I really like Michael Penix Jr. I love the activity, I love this arm. I love the way he pushed the football down the field, which was something we didn't see early on in the season from Kirk Cousins. Bijan is an absolute monster in the backfield. I think to utilize him, but it's still like, what is Kyle Pitts though, Mina? Right? Like who is he? How do you utilize him? Right?
You know
Darnell
when you
Mooney.
you know when you see like something happening on Twitter, like a fight. Well, maybe you can't relate to this because you get involved. But for me, when I see a fight between people on Twitter and I'm just like, I'm gonna pull a J. Cole here and just opt out. Like I don't
Yeah,
want to be part of this discussion. That's how I feel about Kyle Pitts at this point. I'm like, I'm gonna opt out. I don't want to try to like make Kyle Pitts predictions. Like I'm just opting out. I don't know. I don't know who
yeah.
he is. That's how I feel about him. All right. Sorry, Falcons, you have it 22.
Yep.
All right. So the Jags are still on the board. I'm going to throw maybe a curveball for you. I'm going to bring in the New England Patriots here.
So I went Jags here.
The Jags fall is stopped at 23.
Yeah, I went Jags here. I think Liam Cohen understands offense. Like you look at all the places he's been, whether it's Kentucky, Los Angeles, back to Kentucky, then to Tampa. Like he just figures it out. I believe like because it was Jacksonville, we didn't talk about it as much. But BTJ is a monster.
BTJ and Travis Hunter has the
Yeah,
potential.
like
that was my reason for having the Jags so high. If Travis Hunter is who we think he is.
So Mina, so I was on Get Up the other day, and Dan Graziano, I don't know how true this is. Dan Graziano said he had a conversation with someone in Jacksonville who said the utilization of Travis Hunter could change week to week. In the sense of where he's needed or not needed, or where they could take advantage of him week to week, which was the first time I had ever heard that. Huh?
That's a lot for a rookie, though.
That's my point, right? Like, in order to do that, you truly have to, and obviously you won't have a mastery of the playbook. You have to have a great understanding of it, because you're not getting consistent reps anywhere. It's this week I'm offensive, this week I'm defensive. For me, I still stand on the point that he needs to play defense, his primary position. That's what I believe, and have certain packages, formations, personnel where he's used on the offensive side of the ball.
Okay, so the Patriots are the team I brought in. I'm going to put them up against the Raiders here at 24.
Patriots.
Okay.
Patriots. I have the Patriots there. I really loved what I saw out of Drake May last year. I thought the mobility was a huge thing. I thought the patience, the poise, the composure as a rookie was big. Defensively, this team has an opportunity to be really good. You bring in Mike Vrabel, Stephon Diggs also on the offensive side of the ball. It looks like he's going to be healthy and ready to go. I expect a lot of improvement from them.
Raiders versus Panthers at 25. Is this too high?
I went Raiders.
Okay.
Yeah, I went Raiders here. Gino, Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll was trying to make Las Vegas, Seattle again. right? He understood that there were some pieces he wanted there. I think you go out and get Genty. It will be interesting to see if they're good enough up front to utilize him, right?
Mm,
If the run game,
line,
uh,
yeah.
yeah, if the run game is able to sort of not necessarily excel, but be a big part of this team because we know what Pete Carroll wants to do.
Are you as okay? So we obviously you firsthand watched this in the NCAA championship. Are you as high on Kelly 2.0 as I am?
Yes, I am. He changed.
Changed and was
He changed.
so good at Ohio
He changed.
State.
And here's what I'll say, Mina. In a day and age where what he started in college football is what everybody does. And to have he had three pros on the outside,
Yeah,
right? He had three legit pros. One guy is going to be a top 3 pick when he decides to enter the draft in 2 years. And there were times where I'm obviously sitting in the stadium when they're playing Notre Dame, who's beat up front, and he's like, you know what, we're gonna go 12. You know what, we're gonna go like we're gonna run the football. We're gonna find ways to use 21. And even though I have all of these people on the outside, this is where I can win. And you know what else? We're gonna huddle.
yeah. You know who else is going to do those things? Go 12 and run the football? The Las Vegas Raiders. So yeah, I feel like we got a little preview of that. I like this offense. I just don't like the defense. That's why they're so low.
They're not
Okay,
very good.
Panthers versus Colts at 26.
I went Colts. I went Colts. I think Tyler Warren and the way he could be utilized by Shane Steichen is is going to be, very interesting. He did everything at Penn State. The quarterback position worries me, but I do believe that Daniel Jones becomes the starter. I believe it's going to be about professionalism. It's going to be about the ability to master the offense, the ability to execute what Shane Steichen wants to be done. And also, you add Lou Anarumo. You all know how I feel about him on the defensive side, of the ball. And so I got the Colts here.
They also gave Lou actual players, which the Colts never do. They signed Travaris Ward and Cam Bynum. I feel like people slept on those.
Can't bind him. Yep.
Yeah, real opportunity to, I think, make that defense good. All right, Panthers versus Jets at 27.
So I went Jets here. It was a toss up, to be honest. CJ Mosley was injured a ton last year. He ends up retiring. I think the way that they utilized Quincy Williams showed that he could do so much more than what we'd seen before. I thought he played at an all-pro level. McDonald becoming a factor on the outside. Johnson should be back healthy this year. Maybe we see Sauce come back and be the Sauce that we had in the first 2 seasons as well. I know he's trying to work on the deal. Garrett and Justin, that feels good to me. And if I'm the Jet, I probably dangle a little Brees Hall as trade bait. I don't know. But if he's there and what Justin feels adds to the run and the way that you can utilize Brees in the pass game as well, I think that this offense could be pretty good, pretty dangerous. And so I'm going to put them there.
All right, we are in the bottom 5 here. This is really makes it hard to choose. Panthers versus Titans.
I went Panthers. You good?
Feels like a tie for the Titans, but yeah. Okay, Panthers.
Yeah. I went Panthers. I just don't know if I was prouder of a player last year than Bryce Young. You know what I mean? Like, I don't. Why is Bryce Young a player like you just want good things to happen for? I just wanted good things to happen. And the way he played down the stretch, like a memorable play for me is the throw against the Atlanta Falcons late, right? He throws it, turns around before it's caught. And in a million years, you couldn't have told me, what was it, week 2, I think he was benched, or
Yeah.
it was very early. You couldn't have told me that we see that from that player at some point in 2024, right? You go out, you add Ted McMillan. I believe this allows Xavier Legette to do some of the things he's good at, right? We're not going to ask you to go out and beat one-on-one coverage all the time. We're not going to ask you to go out and be the guy. I think that's really big. And I liked what Dave Canales did in sort of evolving with the way that this offense had to evolve throughout the season.
I'm excited about the Panthers. The defense is just still missing too many pieces. Although getting obviously Derek Brown coming back is a huge. But yeah, I'm optimistic. That's why I had them a little bit higher maybe than some. All right, Titans versus Giants.
Titans. And I think people are going to think this is high for the Titans too. I think people are going to, I think people might think it's high for the Titans. But yeah, I have the Titans. I really like Cam Ward. I think he got some stuff to him. Tony Pollard and Calvin Ridley in a year that was bad, both produced pretty well, in my opinion. I think Ladarius Sneed has to be healthy though defensively for this team to be anything that they want to be. We're obviously near the bottom. It's not like a lot of great things to say about any of these teams, but I do believe they're better this year than that last.
I think two of these teams you have something to say that's very positive, and I'm going to put them head to head: the Giants and the Browns. So there's kind of a similarity between them, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I'm gonna go. I went Giants here. To be honest, I believe they have a better quarterback situation than the Browns. Yeah. I also believe that from a rush standpoint, they can be absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
Just Kayvon Thibodeau is going to be the third best rusher out of these on this team, first off, right? Brian Burns, Abdul Carter, and just the matchup problems they're going to be able to create up front. And not to mention, Dexter Lawrence is the best player on the team.
Yeah.
Right? And so I just think that up front, this team is going to be dominant.
As an offensive line, like how do you prepare? Because you have to double Dexter on, why don't I call it Dexter? It was weirdly casual, but you have to double him on, so you do that. And oh, by the way, here come the, hounds of hell at you. Like it's just, they have a truly dominant position.
They really do. They really do.
But the Cleveland Browns have Myles Garrett. So I'm going to put them against, well, it's not a choice. New Orleans Saints are the final two teams. Browns versus Saints for 30
Browns. Browns. I'm going Browns. I had the Saints last. I think it was Deontay Johnson just said he expects Kenny Pickett to start. I read that. You know what I mean?
They played together, so
yeah. So I'm not.
He also
I'm not.
Said he didn't go into a game because it was 41 degrees in Baltimore.
He said a lot. He said a lot. Yeah, because like the Browns honestly should be really good defensively again. Like they have people, and they got them everywhere. You wonder what's going to happen with JOK in the neck injury.
I don't think he's playing.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't know if he ever comes back.
The UCLA backer, I think, is going to start.
But he's a monster though. That's it. So
I like him. I did like him.
They're not. He obviously will have to grow. They're not the same, but there are some athletic traits there and some capabilities, characteristics that I think work well with what they're going to ask him to do with the Cleveland Browns. Obviously, Myles Garrett is the dude, but I still think offensively they have a long way to go, and you just don't know who the quarterback's going to be. And if I had to bet on it, multiple people start there this year.
Yeah, I think we get one of the vets week one, maybe Flacco, and then they make the switch at some point. I do, since we have a little bit of time, I do want to ask you one question about the Browns, because I was thinking about them on my defenses pod. They took a huge step back last year. I think there's a litany of reasons for that. JOK being out, the offense being absolutely historically inept, putting them in terrible positions. Martin Emerson declined a bit. But the question I wanted to ask you is this. The Browns play like a very distinct style of defensive football compared to the rest of the NFL. Way more man coverage, right?
Yep.
And do you think they have to evolve at all?
Yes,
or do you think they,
I do.
Because we saw offenses attacking that from the beginning of the season.
Nope, I do. And I think that's part of Emerson's regression.
Yeah.
Is teams understanding, I know exactly what you're going to be in. I know who is going to be lined up. And based on that, that's how I'm going to call plays. And teams just started winning. Now, I do think, and maybe because it's Cleveland, Mina, I don't think we talk about Denzel Ward enough. Like just his individual coverage and people understanding. I know he's going to be in man. I know he's going to have the number one receiver, and the way that dude steps up each and every week is huge. I also wonder too, is there a way they can use Grant Delpit differently? I've obviously watched him play for a long time because he's an LSU guy, extremely rangy, extremely ball savvy, but he's sort of he's their in the box guy. He's their man-to-man on tight end guy, sort of the physical enforcer. I think if they could move him around a little bit, give him some freedom, he could be one of those players that becomes a ball disruptor. And part of that would be evolving and doing things differently, playing a little more zone, giving his team an opportunity to see the football. They never see the football.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is such a good point about, and I think they were dead last in turnovers last year, turnover rate, by the way.
Because you can't see, like, I remember, Mina, we would have games where Troy would just walk up to Coach LeBeau and he'd be like, Coach, just let me see the ball. You know what I mean? Because we played so much fire zone, we played so much man, and he just wanted opportunities with vision to break. And the Browns don't have that very often.
All right, let's wrap with one final thing. Here is the final power ranking. I'm going to read them all at the end. I'm challenging you to say a nice thing about the New Orleans Saints because they are the final team before I read the final list aloud for the audio audience.
New Orleans Saints play in a wonderful city, Mina.
How about they're finally accepting that they're bad? How about that? So they can actually rebuild. That's a good thing.
They had to. I will say this, about the Saints. It's going to be interesting to see how Kellen goes about picking a quarterback and developing him. Like, does it feel that if it's Spencer Rattler, if it's Tyler Shuck, does it feel that they're looking at him as this is the future? Or if we just need to get to next year?
That's the curse and the blessing of like the second round quarterback is you don't know, right? Like with the first rounder, we know. With the late rounder, it's obviously, but they did draft Tyler Shuck pretty high. So I don't know. All right. So here's the final list. I'm going to read it to you and let me know if there's anything that you regret. Eagles, Ravens, Chiefs, Bills, Lions, Packers, Commanders, Bengals, Rams, Texans, Chargers, Bucks, Broncos, Vikings, Niners, Steelers, Cowboys, Bears, Dolphins, Cardinals, Seahawks, Falcons, Jags, Patriots, Raiders, Colts, Jets, Panthers, Titans, Giants, Browns, and Saints.
Nope, I feel good about that, Mina.
And there you have it. A perfect power rankings from the great Ryan Clark. Catch him on the Pivot podcast or on NFL Live, where we will certainly soon reconvene for the NFL season. Thank you so much for coming on the pod, buds.
My girl, thank you. Wow.